One of the things that I really appreciate about keeping an art journal and about sketchbooking is that I can make my page and then figure out what my inspiration was on an unconscious level going into the whole project. And it's fine sometimes to start with a prompt and to think, okay, I'm going to make my journal spread about X or Y or Z, or I'm going to dedicate my practice today to this idea or that idea. But sometimes I think it's even more illuminating to just make the marks, just show up and just start doodling and start pushing paint around. And then as you start doing that, to take a look at what you have in front of you and to decide what it must mean, what it must have meant to you at the time that you were making it. And what I see in imagery like this are kind of the images that these shapes suggest to me are those of a stone wall or a pile of stones that has to balance some type of objects where certain objects are supporting other objects within the space. And so for me, these pages, both alike, very much speak to this idea of support and different disparately sized and disparately shaped elements coming together in these supported and stable arrangements. So I'm going to use some fine liners and just add a little bit of decoration into these spaces. Just a little bit of doodling. Nothing too fussy or too deliberate, just some doodles that support the idea of support, mutual benefit, growth, different principles that I think relate to this idea of support. And some of these doodles can be very subtle. If I keep my color choices similar to one another, it's not something that really leaps out. If I use a color that contrasts a great deal with the color that is behind it, such as in this case, then the drawing becomes much more apparent, much more obvious. And I'm just picking very repetitive and simple patterns that I can draw easily and that I know I'll likely be successful at drawing. The simpler and more familiar the image that I draw, the stronger the likelihood of me being able to draw it without running into problems. And I think it's really okay to not challenge yourself too much with every single part of your artwork. I think sometimes, I find anyway, that I am more challenged by things than I think I will be, and that something which is very, very simple on the surface can actually be kind of challenging to execute. So I find that by keeping it simple, I still have plenty of challenges, even meeting kind of that simple, problem solving demand. Even just simple lines are going to end up being kind of wonky just because of the limitations of my human hand. So I don't have to go out of my way to make the challenge very challenging. you get to decide how often you want to go out of your comfort zones, and it is good to go out of them some of the time, for sure. But you get to decide how much time you want to spend outside your comfort zones. And I think that it is valuable to limit yourself to going outside your comfort zones to like one or two aspects of whatever you're doing on a page. So, you know, maybe your comfort zone is painting bleeds, and your outside your comfort zone area is painting specific shapes with consciously made edges and finite shapes and just a little bit of water and not too much bleeding. So, you know, I can address that in my background, and I've kind of feel like I've done my due diligence at stretching myself, at kind of, you know, going outside my comfort zones. So I can pull back after that, say, okay, I've done my due diligence. I've kind of expanded my repertoire a little bit, you know, dipped my toes in the cold water and got in it a little bit. And now I can get out of it again, get back into the warm water and do some stuff that's really comfortable and just feels really nice to do. There's nothing wrong with that. Can reinforce the outlines of some of these shapes if I want. That's one way to handle this part of the drawing. Maybe just pull a few of these out and see what happens. Can kind of decorate some of these with little repeating things. And I could just as easily do this with pencils, right? I don't have to use my fine liners. If I don't have a set of fine liners, I don't have to use, I could use pencil or vice versa. If I don't have pencil, I could have done a lot of this with fine liner. It's just nice to have both. And one other thing I can use is white gel pen. This is something I like to incorporate into my watercolor quite frequently. It's subtle, it's not, doesn't leap out that much, but I do like being able to add these little white details. I can go back to pencil too. There's no constraint on that. So maybe I want to go back and work some pencil lines into some of these. Also, I don't have to decorate every part of every section. I can selectively decorate some of these parts and not others, and just sort of change the shape if I feel moved to do that. Also, I could color in some of these. Deepen the value a bit, as we talked about on the other page. There aren't very many darks in this drawing, so I can add a couple and see what happens. So I can reintroduce the idea of decorating these bits a little bit, but do it within my shapes as well. So maybe I want to add some decoration to here. And in this case, I think I'm going to refer to some of these pinks with my neon pink. It's a great color. Something really calming and meditative about these tiny little dots that I really like. It's a symbol or a motif that I keep coming back to. I like them irregular, regular, just however. Something I like to do is to get a little bit organic with some of these overlapping shapes. Just make some shapes that kind of weave into one another a little bit. You see, I kind of, by alternating how those fit together, I get that sense of them kind of woven into each other a little bit. You'll develop kind of your own shapes that you keep returning to when you doodle over time, but that's one that I like a lot. I'm going to introduce that here a little bit. So you'll see there are wavy lines that just sort of intersect at different points. And I can use some of the drawn green lines to suggest what direction these should go in and where the edges might occur. I can kind of reinforce those edges a little bit, the edges of that particular shape, where it starts, where it ends. So once I've had the realization that X, Y, or Z idea is actually what is driving the piece that I've made, or I'm able to say, well, actually, this is about, you know, this idea of support and grounding and, you know, sort of stability, Then I can do a little bit of journaling or a little bit of reinforcement of this idea if I choose to at the end. It is optional. In this case, I'm going to leave this page, but I could maybe write the names of people who are supportive to me and hold space for them and just think about them. Or I could do the same thing with different concepts or different constructs within my life that I find supportive and grounding and stabilizing. So something like art, or my innate sense of optimism, much as I may make fun of it or sort of brush it aside. I think, I'm prickly but optimistic, so I could sort of, pay homage to that sense of optimism, and I'll just allow it to be without critiquing it or apologizing for it. So those are just different ways to think about the page and different ways to use open spaces that remain after you have created a page in your journal. They are optional and by no means necessary, nor do you have to do them on every page. While I don't feel the urge to do them here, I do feel like this page could probably benefit from just a little bit of that kind of treatment. So I like that idea of, just sort of giving free rein and giving acknowledgement and some open space to allow myself to, in this case, allow myself to indulge in my sense of optimism. So I'm going to maybe write one word somewhere on the page that pays homage to that can just kind of acknowledge it and be unironic and committed to it. So hope. As cliched as it is, I'm going there without hesitation and without irony. And I'm using my pink neon to do it, which seems somehow appropriate, doesn't it? That I would use kind of my most playful, most fun, most over-the-top color to just put that front and center. So, okay, from unconscious scribbling to little challenges in games. Remember, going back to pivot this way, pivot that way. Lots of different ways to draw, even if you feel that your drawing skill is not fully developed. Whether it is fully developed or not, these are ways to draw that are extremely liberating, beneficial, and they will teach you new things about your drawing, your style, and your enjoyment of drawing every time you do them. So they are ways to draw that I still come back to after years and years and years of drawing. And I think that they are also an absolutely great place to start. And I hope that you have enjoyed your start with them. Till the next class, I will see you soon.